Hi everyone. So I've decided to just to do the recording instead of doing live meeting. This is more effective. Okay, so we're going to um, the the 8th unit, which is scoring in the alternative assessment. So we have already done some of the topic related to this in the test scoring of the test item, but I'm decided to go more detail on this one so that we're not confused with the scoring of assessment here. So for this unit, by the end of this lesson, I hope you can compare between checklist, rating scale, and rubrics. And the last one will be you'll be able to have some knowledge and skills to create your own scoring scheme better using either checklist, rating scale, and also rubrics or the answers key. Okay, so in the most cases, alternative assessment involve complex learning activities. Okay, and it will provide us a very quite complex evidence of learning, something that the students' product or the students' performance will be very complex. So it we need a suitable method to assess this kind of work. We cannot use the same way as the tests are being done. Okay, so there are several methods in the scoring methods for alternative assessment. So the most frequent methods that are being used are checklists, rating scales, and also the last one, the rubrics. Okay, so probably the rubrics is most quite popular because it has its own strength. Okay, what is checklist? So checklist usually contains behaviors, the list of behaviors, list of traits, list of characteristics, or list of something that we want to observe, we want to see from a student's performance, student's works, or student's behavior. So we can see that, and when we can see that, meaning the behavior is present. Okay, so usually this involved with a complex behavior or complex performance. So with checklists we can see, uh, uh, we know what to see, we know what to observe from a student's work or student's performance. So usually checklists are scored yes or no, present or absent, or 0 or 1 point to be given. Okay, meaning it is only uh, 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 scoring here. So it's either 1 or 0. So this is similar to the test. So checklist is more uh, parallel with true false kind of test. Okay, so usually if we cannot see what we want to see, so we can say that we don't have the opportunity to observe the performance and so on. In some cases, okay, so we want to make the performance become more competitive or something. We want to make sure that the student have performed it well. So we look for the frequencies of the mistake the students make. So usually we can give a negative point for each mistake. Okay, so it's either 0, 1, or negative 1. So this is an example of a checklist. Okay, so it has a tick here, just the observer or the assessor will just tick one of it. Okay, it's either observe or opportunity, no opportunity to observe, and so on. So on this checklist, we don't give a negative for anything done wrong, but it's only looking for whether it is uh, present or not, whether you can see these steps have been performed or not. Okay, so as we can see here, Okay, this is all the list of the thing that we can or we want to observe for using a microscope. Okay, so the thing here, the inject is either it is being observed or not. That's all. We are not looking for whether the degree of the quality of performing of these steps. For example, uh, how well the student wipe the slide with the lens paper is either yes or no. If the student wipe a little bit, but it's already wiped, but it's not done well, I mean, we can still have to say it is observed. Okay, so checklist doesn't offer the information of the quality of the performance being done. Okay, so that's why we need we also have this kind of methods, which is called the rating scale. Okay, so rating scale is normally used when the complex performance of the work doesn't give cannot be judged based only yes or no or present or absent. We still desire the quality of the performance of the works. Okay, so the most common form of rating scale used is to assign numbers. Okay, you normally give bigger number for if the thing represent a good quality, and smaller number or smaller score with a poor quality. So with rating scale, it will make the raters focus on the observation on a certain aspect of the performance or works. Okay, so this is an example of the of a rating scale here. Okay, we have, for example, here did the speech content meaningful to the topic. So we can either give 1, 2, 3, or 4. So each of it will represent clear. The most clear is 4. The least clear is or the least not truly meaningful. The least meaningful is 1. So on this case, for this rating scale, it doesn't give 0 point for here. Okay. So another one usually use the analytical scoring technique, which is called primary threat scoring, which is developed since the 80s. So for the test developer or for teachers, they will have to identify the most salient or most important characteristics or threats that give the greatest importance. Okay, when trying to observe the product process of performance. So usually what we want to do here is we have to think what kind of evidence, what kind of characteristics that you want to see that indicate the learning outcome have been achieved. Okay, so normally, okay, you usually point within 1 to 5. Okay, to represent the degree of the performance. So this is well done or not done at all. Okay. So for example, here, this is example of primary threat scoring. Okay. For example, you understand the problem. So it's scored either 0 to 1, 2, 3, or 4. So this one uses 0. That one make the rater, if he or she cannot see the thing, the understanding of problem is present or not attempted, so it can give 0. If you only give 1 to 4, if the thing is not performed, the students may still have 1 mark here. Okay, so this is the example here. So as you can see, the rating not necessarily have the same maximum score. So this one 0 to 4, this one 0 to 2. Okay, it depends on the weightage that you want. Okay, so here it can indicate that understanding the problem and solving the problem has more merit compared to the answering the problem. Okay, the answering the problem only given 2 marks for correct solution. Then the last one will be the rubric. So rubric normally used, okay, quite widely used, but sometimes it is confusing. Okay, so Actually, rubrics means in Latin red. In Latin, it's actually called rubrica. Okay, red ochre and so on. So it's actually normally used as a heading in the document, and it is usually indicate a direction. Okay, for that time, it is actually for the use of the church. You have to understand that at that time, uh, uh, printing normally only involve the church, and also because it's a very expensive kind of technology, so it's only certain organization can have that kind of uh, uh, printing. Okay, so therefore actually rubric is in the sense used at that time is a meaning is a guide actually. So basically the meaning of um, rubric is quite similar with marking scheme. Normally the UK and the Australia use marking scheme as a term, while rubric is normally used by the US. Yeah, so but for this course, okay, so I want to clarify that whatever the people use in UK or US or Australia, uh, for me, marking scheme, or for most of actually those doing assessment, is marking scheme or scoring scheme is actually referring to any form of guide for assessing and scoring learning. Okay, so that is marking scheme. All right, so marking scheme can include rubrics, checklists, rating scale, and so on. So rubric is actually is a specific form of marking scheme. It's an example of a marking scheme. So when we say marking scheme, so we should understand that it can be a rubric, can be checklist, it can be rating scale, or it can be something like this. Okay, so we have learned this outline of solution, which is quite inaccurate when I call it analytic marking scheme last time. It's actually either model answer of our or outline solution. So this part we have done a little bit. Uh, this is usually used for test-based assessment. So we score the test-based assessment using correct answers. Okay. So the other scoring scheme or marking scheme would be checklist, rating scale that we have already mentioned just now. Then rubrics. Okay. So rubric is a specific type of scoring scheme. So rubrics uh, can be characterized either holistic, analytic, or general, or specific, or task specific. Okay, so in some way, rubrics actually uh, can be understood, can be looked like a rating scale. But however, in convention, rubrics is always refers to a scale which each level has a complete description of performance quality, meaning it has maybe, for example, 1 to 2. So what kind of quality is that? Okay, for rubrics. Okay, however, for rating scale is quite general. It's only tell in terms of the degree. It's either frequent or not frequent. Okay, done greatly degree or somewhat or not at all. So this is rating scale. So we can actually say rubric is a special rating scale. Okay, it's a specific rating scale. And if we look at it in a bigger view, rubric rating scale is actually just a checklist. However, in terms of giving the marks is slightly different. For checklist, we score as either 0 to 1. For rating scale, our score for that kind of list is either 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so on. Okay, so for rating scale. For rubrics, a little bit similar with rating scale, but we know it may combine a few things in certain score. So we're going to talk about a bit further about rubrics. So rubric can be categorized according to how we score it. Okay, how we score our students. Is it combined category or single category and so on? Or what kind of marks the score is representing? Is it something specific or something specific to the content or something in general? So if the type based on the criteria, so we look at whether it is general or task specific. So then we can look at the rating scale. What kind of rating scale? Is it a holistic scale or analytic scale? Okay, so you need to understand that whether the rubric is analytic or holistic, it is independent whether it is general or task specific. So meaning to say, analytic rubric can be general or task specific. Or if a holistic rubric, it can be also general holistic rubric or general task specific holistic rubric. Okay, right. So look at the first one. General rubrics is normally called as generic rubric as well. So it actually describes the performance quality in general term. It is usually can be applied to many different tasks. Okay, so it is this kind of rubric doesn't assess specific content. So it's actually looking for general skill, general uh, tasks actually. Okay, for example here, for rubric for writing. So maybe for rubrics for writing, we can use for different assignment, 2 or 3 different assignment in one course or one class. Okay, and also math problem solving. Okay, this kind of rubric, you can use it for many math problem solving and so on. Okay, so rubrics for generic rubric is actually assessing uh, general behavior or general skill. It is not uh, content specific. Okay, so this is an example of general rubrics or generic rubrics. So this is to judge problem in terms of interpreting of a graph. So this kind of task is quite general. It across different type of assignment or different type of performance. Then the next one is task specific. So task specific is something uh, it is normally content specific or directly related to the standard of learning outcome. So it is specific to certain thing. So usually task specific is usually can only be used for certain topics. Okay. So however, and also you need to remember rubrics are also appropriate for assessing conceptual understanding. So task specific rubrics actually can also be used for test-based assessment. Okay. So this one is a example of task-specific rubrics. Okay, we give 0 point, for example, here. There's no point on the graph label correctly indicates incorrect mode of transportation of graph info. Okay, explanation of reasoning is faulty. Okay, so this is given 0. So 4 points is given to this. So each of the description here, you can see is very specific. Okay, it is content based. Right? So this is a content based. Okay, so I don't know a rubric is generic or task specific. So now we are looking either it is holistic rubric or whether it is analytic rubric. So we know what is being assessed. Okay, now we need to know how it is being scored. Okay, is it scored holistically or analytically. Okay. Okay, so holistic rubric, also called as global or sorting or rating, okay, which require you as a teacher or as a rater to make judgment about the overall quality of each student's response. So this holistic rubric is quite similar with the one that I explained in the holistic marking scheme. Okay, so it usually involves scoring mechanism where a single score or rating is used to represent student entire work. So meaning it is holistic because we give score to the entire student's work. Okay, so every score is very general. Okay, it's very not general, but it's holistic to the student work. Okay, so usually the rater examine the entire process or product, okay, which include all of the elements that work, then give a single score. Okay, so usually a score or rating may be uh, a normal or general, the common holistic rubric that we can give example is we give A for certain quality of work, B, C, D, and so on. So that kind of the rating we give. Okay. So holistic rubric usually utilized when we can tolerate on the certain errors on the student's work that we looking for an overall quality. Okay, so we want to look for that one. So we not bother to make judgment the other work, but we are using this as something that is a quick way to give students feedback or to get information about the overall quality of the students' performance or their work. Okay, so usually this kind of holistic rubric is also used when there is no definitive correct answer. All right, so we know that there is we are looking things as a whole. Okay, so the score for holistic rubric is an overall quality, proficiency, or understanding of the specific content or skill. So it is a good way to assess students. Usually, this one is should be uh, used uh, uh, for summative assessment. Okay, and holistic scoring rubric is also appropriate for extended response subject matter for essays and papers. Okay, this one also being exposed in the previous topic unit. Okay, so it's usually looking at the student's ability to synthesize or to create or to evaluate and so on. Is meaning to say this holistic rubric is more on the student's overall work and not really on the student knowledge of the specific content. So it's also appropriate for final exam or projects, okay, where giving feedback to the student is not a very it's not a consideration here. Okay, so this is some purpose or some way of using holistic rubrics. And if the assessment is a large scale, okay, uh, whether it's a writing or subject matter essay, so it is preferable to use holistic scoring because it's much easier than the other one, which is analytic rubrics. Okay, usually this is used for summative assessment or evaluation. So you can see here a holistic rubric. It has a rating scale here, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe ABC. Okay, and here the evaluative criteria is explained along. So you have to understand each of the criteria when marking or scoring students' work here. Okay, so you need to understand what is the difference between 1 and 2, what 2 and 3, 3 and 4, and how you're going to make this mark, how you're going to mark the students' work. right? So this is called holistic rubric. Then the analytic rubrics. This one is we call point scale, okay, scoring key, analytic threat rubric, or threat scale. Okay, so it has specific criterion, dimension, and threats or elements. So this is much the criteria is much similar to the checklist. Okay, very detailed, specific behavior that we want to observe and want to give score. And then the individual score is combined to generate a total overall score. Okay, similar to checklist, analytic scoring rubrics usually require the list of major criteria or good works. Okay, usually called dimension of threats. Okay, so that usually relate to the criteria usually relate to a certain learning outcome. Okay, so analytic rubrics usually preferred when focus type of response is required. We want to assess specific skill, specific behavior of the students. Okay, and the tasks or the works may have more than two acceptable responses, and the skills, other skills, that the more generic skill like creativity, problem solving, and so on, it is not that uh, being focused in this type of assessment. So analytic rubric is quite similar to the task specific rubric, okay, with in which that it is very uh, content content based. However, the thing here, analytic rubric, difference from the task specific. Uh, for analytic rubrics, it is breaking down the specific criteria similar to the checklist, and you have to identify all this and try to give marks on based on the criteria given, uh, uh, criteria being identified. Okay, so the analytical approach this kind of approach is very good, which can provide diagnostic feedback to the students regarding their performance, or which is related to their strength, to the weakness of their work. Okay, this is something that cannot be done in a holistic approach. So analytic rubric is something very useful for us to use in formative assessment. So this is an example of analytic rubric here. So the criteria is given here: title, labels, accuracy, or legibility here. You can give more specific description for the title here. Okay, what is it about here? What is the scale here? Okay, so score. So this is type of score that you can give. Okay, for the title, if no title, we give 0. Okay, so the weightage is about 10% here, and so on. So it has weightage here. Okay, so this is analytic rubric. Right, so this is a few advantages and disadvantages of different type of rubrics. Okay, for analytic, so the advantages is you can provide diagnostic, you can give formative feedback to the students. Okay, so it's very useful for for formative assessment, but you can use it also for summative assessment. Okay, you can use this both. Okay, so this advantage, it's not easy to build analytic rubrics. Okay, it is not easy to build, and also it will take more time to score students' work, and then it also quite hard to achieve inter-rater reliability. Okay, so meaning to say you can go to very deep on the very detail on the assessment, but you're going to lose a little bit in terms of the time, in terms also in terms of the reliability. Okay. For holistics, the advantage is it is fast. Okay. Usually, it is easier to get inter-rater reliability. Very good for summative assessment, but very bad for formative assessment. Okay. And it is not easy to communicate with the students in terms of what their learning outcome here based on the holistic rubrics. But so because you can see here there's a give and take between analytic and also holistic. Okay, for general, okay, rubric, the advantage will be you can use this, you can share it with students, okay, and explicitly linking assessment to the instruction, okay. You can use the rubric, same rubrics or for several tasks or assessment. And then students can actually use this for their self-assessment. Okay, and also here you can say, look at this one. Students can also help you to build up the generic rubric as well. However, few disadvantage of using general. Okay, it has a lower reliability, and then sometimes maybe lower validity. Okay, maybe, and then you need to be able to identify the basic skill that you want to observe, and sometimes it may not be. You have to really identify the characteristic or the criteria so that you can use it for several assessment or assignment. Okay, for task specific, it make you easy to score. Okay, but it may require time to build this kind of rubric. But the problem similar to analytical, it is less time to acquire. Oh, actually, it's less time to acquire. It is very good here. It can provide you easier to achieve inter-reliability for this type of rubric. However, the problem with this, not problem, is the disadvantage or the weakness for this kind of rubric is once you share it with the students, it is actually the answer. Okay, it is the answer. So you give away the answers to the student because task specific is specific content. Okay, then each task may involve a different content, so you have to make a new rubrics, or you need to have a specific rubric for each task. Okay, so these are few advantage and disadvantage of the rubrics. So you need to select it based on the learning outcome, based on uh, the thing that you give merits, is either the purpose of the assessment. Is it summative or uh, or or formative? Okay, so I think that's all. Thank you for this unit. I will continue for the next unit in a different video.